Previous Harford County videos that feature things you didn't know included the founder of commercial ice cream, the inventor of the Ouija board, and the location of the county's Flatiron Corner. This third part of that series continues with how a Bel Air rooster challenged a Ma and Pa locomotive, why there was a crook in the chimney of a blacksmith's forge, and how shoe peg corn got its name. All are rather interesting. The overwhelming majority are informative, and a few, well, they're just for fun. We begin with the county's historic Old Post Road.
The venerable and inventive Benjamin Franklin is generally recognized as the father of the American postal system. He laid out a delivery route from Falmouth, Maine to Charleston, South Carolina, and since the cost to deliver a letter was based on the miles it was transported, he invented a carriage odometer to accurately measure distance. The route through Harford County is called Old Post Road and generally followed today's Route 7, passing through Joppatown, a future Baltimore County seat, and then onto the hamlet of Bush, later called Harfordtown, afterwards passing through Perriman, the location of Spasucia Church, and finally landing at Susquehanna Lower Ferry, now called Havre de Grace. If you look carefully at the mortar sandwiched between old bricks, you will likely spot small fragments of oyster shells. This resulted from using piles of the bivalves, called middens, left behind by Native Americans as an early source of limestone. The oyster shells were heated in a limestone kiln, creating a process that drove off excess carbon dioxide. This left behind powdery quicklime, to which sand was mixed and water added, to become the mortar of choice for construction of brick and stone structures. As the middens were gradually depleted, building blocks of limestone were mined locally, and the debris therefrom crushed into rubble and substituted for the oyster shells. Slate was discovered in Harford County as early as 1734, when two immigrants from Wales purchased land in the Delta, Pennsylvania area that would later be known as the Peach Bottom Slate region. The slate found in Pennsylvania and in Maryland was of excellent quality, and much of it found use in the construction of buildings and on the roofs. As slate weighs 172 pounds per cubic foot, almost 3 times heavier than water, transporting it over long distances on poor roads generally limited its use to local consumption. This changed in 1840 with the opening of the Susquehanna and Tidewater canals that provided both north and south transportation at a reasonable cost. As the fortunes of the canal waned toward the latter part of the 1800s, so did the slate industry. Other roofing materials were taking hold. However, slate granules were being used as a coating on manufactured shingles, and that continued into the 1950s. Some operations followed until 1970, after which Harford County slate mining ceased. From the time of colonial settlement in America in the early 1600s to the late 1800s, when steel machine tools began to dominate, the blacksmith was the principal fabricator and repairman of iron objects. The role and importance of the blacksmith in Harford County is highlighted by the recognition that 3 of the 34 signers of the 1775 Bush Declaration practiced this trade. They were Samuel Caldwell, James Harris, and James Little. The shop of a blacksmith is called a smithy, which had a coal-fired forge for heating the iron, hammers and an anvil for shaping the hot metal, and a bucket or barrel of water for quenching the completed product. One interesting aspect of the shop was a distinctive crook in the forge chimney that was used to exhaust smoke and fumes. According to tradition, this design feature produced a better draft for expelling unwanted airborne particles. A principal supply of fresh water for Baltimore City is obtained from nearby Northside Loch Raven Reservoir, and this liquid is sometimes affectionately called Loch Raven Ale. Another more distant source just below the Pennsylvania line is Pretty Boy Reservoir, But when city planners forecasted a possible future shortage, they turned to the mouth of Harford County's Deer Creek as the best solution. In the early 1960s, the 38-mile-long Susquehanna Conduit, generally known as the Big Inch, was constructed from a pumping station on Craig's Corner Road to the Montebello Filtration Plant in Baltimore City, along a route parallel to I-95. Taps were provided throughout the length of this 102-inch pipe, but most of Harford County's municipal water is obtained from wells at Perryman and from Winters Run. In colonial times, the principal north-south travel route through Harford County was the Old Post Road, and at present-day Havre de Grace, a ferry provided travelers passage over the Susquehanna River. In 1818, the first Maryland bridge over the mighty river was constructed in the area of Rock Run Mill, connecting with Port Deposit on the Cecil County side. Entering bridge traffic paid a toll before crossing, and in the Rock Run area, a small village developed with stores selling provisions to travelers as well as to local residents. By 1854, however, the decaying covered timber bridge was destroyed, and the village gradually faded into obscurity. Today, the only remaining bridge-related structure is the toll house, and in the distance across the river, the stone piers, now overgrown with trees, can still be seen just above the water's edge. The early source of drinking water in the rolling hills of Harford County most often was a dribbling hillside spring, often covered by a stone structure. In the flatter areas of the coastal plain, it was more common to obtain water from a well, initially using a windlass and bucket, and later a hand-operated water pump. In most cases, these water delivery devices were located outside of the building or dwelling, made of wood, with a leather-lined piston, and, for preservation, were painted. One color used for these elongated devices was green, promulgating the common name of cucumber pump. In reality, this descriptor derived from the use of wood sawed from a deciduous magnolia trunk, also called a cucumber tree, as this variety imparted no objectionable taste to the water from the tree's sap. One long-ago pump, however, was painted a different color, lending its name to Harford County's Red Pump Road. Before mechanical refrigeration made its debut in the late 1800s, keeping products cold during warmer months was relegated to harvested ice that had been stored in large, well-insulated buildings. The lower Susquehanna River and the adjacent Tidewater Canal in Maryland was the location of wintertime ice gathering that involved scoring, then sawing and breaking the ice into large blocks that were elevated into wooden structures that had insulated walls up to 3 feet thick. During summer months, the ice was delivered to Havre de Grace residents, as well as loaded onto ships for transport to Baltimore, where it was distributed door to door by horse-drawn wagons. It was common practice for customers to place a card in their front window specifying the amount of ice they wanted, whereupon the supplier would deliver the block directly to their icebox in the kitchen. In Harford County, Interstate 95 opened in 1963, being inaugurated on November 14th with a visit from President John F. Kennedy, for whom it was named. Its intersection with Maryland Route 24 was regulated by an automated, non-barrier, southbound entrance toll booth and also a northbound exit booth, each collecting a deposit of 25 cents. The dad of one family with his kids aboard never paid the toll, resulting in the loud ringing of a bell. One day, the mom and the children entered the toll booth, deposited the 25 cents, and proceeded forward, with the youngsters shouting something was wrong because the bell did not go off. Another individual exiting at Route 24 looked down to deposit his change, but observed the coin machine had jammed and the collection basket was filled with quarters. He quickly grabbed a handful and rapidly drove away, with the occupants celebrating, "We're rich." Later, the toll machines were removed. When exploring the Chesapeake Bay in 1608, Captain John Smith observed a bounty of fish that was being gathered by the Susquehannock Indians as part of their diet. At the time, a ferry was established in 1696 at what is present-day Havre de Grace. Fishing in Harford County had become a profitable business. By 1760, herring salted at the mouth of the Susquehanna River was being sold to practically all of the eastern colonies. In 1820, a Havre de Grace resident, Asa Hell Bailey, introduced the fishing float that was a large wooden raft with living quarters and a horse-powered wrench for hauling in a mile-long fishing net. This revolutionized the catch of spawning spring herring and greatly expanded the delivery of salted fish to distant markets. As dams were built upstream on the Susquehanna River, the fish population dwindled, and with the Conowingo hydroelectric dam construction in 1926, the public benefited from the electricity produced, but not so the herring, and the commercial fishing industry disappeared. Harford County is geographically situated between the Piedmont Plateau to the north and the coastal plain on the south, making the intervening terrain between a so-called fall line. This produced rapidly descending water that was ideal for the construction of mills, which proliferated in the county along Little Gunpowder Falls, Winter's Run, Bynum Run, and most significantly, Deer Creek. Such falling water powered grain mills, flint mills, and iron foundries. Private mills still standing today are Whitaker Mill, Chrome Valley Mill, and Deep Run Mill, while those that can be visited by the public are Rock Run Mill in the Susquehanna State Park, Jerusalem Mill in the Gunpowder Falls State Park, and county-owned Eden Mill along Deer Creek. Colonial roads in Harford County were little more than animal or Native American trails that meandered through the forest, avoiding trees, large rocks, and where possible, not having to cross dangerous streams. Some intrepid settlers passed through on foot or horseback, but generally preferred to travel in a boat by water, as it was more comfortable and certainly less dangerous. As roads gradually improved, the two-wheeled cart made an appearance, followed by farm wagons and then locally made carriages as early as 1803. Three large production facilities were the Burns Brothers in Havre de Grace and the Bewlett Carriage Company, along with the Enterprise Carriage Company in Bel Air. Many small operations were found in villages, such as Nathan Grafton's carriage shop near Forest Hill, which supplied the name for Grafton Shop Road. Another village carriage maker was Seth L. Kinsey in Grayston, Maryland. From the south, U.S. Highway 1 passes over Little Gunpowder Falls into Harford County. Then it intersects Mountain Road at Lynch's Corner, thereafter joining Harford Road and becoming U.S. Business 1. It subsequently passes the abandoned Greystone Lodge landmark before heading down a hill crossing over Winter's Run. Previously, its northern heading path traversed this stream on the old 1913 Luton Bridge, a short distance to the east. But this short highway section has now been named Lake Fanny Road. The route runs through the historic county seat of Bel Air, becoming known as Conowingo Road as it skirts by the village of Hickory. Today, it proceeds rather directly to the Conowingo Dam, but historically detoured to the east onto Forge Hill Road as it meandered over Deer Creek, crossing an old 1911 bridge before rejoining the main highway. Finally, it leaves Harford County, crossing over the Susquehanna River atop the Conowingo Hydroelectric Dam. Years ago, some rural Harford County farmers were stirred from their slumber before morning light to attend to their livestock, while others were awakened by the rising sun. If the light of day didn't rouse them, then the crow of a rooster most certainly would. This raucous reminder of the past still exists for a couple of residents who have installed an oversized metal rooster or a wooden facsimile on their properties. Perhaps the county's most memorable fowl event happened in 1902 when an arriving Ma and Pa train entered the Bel Air station only to be challenged by a rooster with mighty spurs squarely perched in the right-of-way. Refusing to move, the cowcatcher swiftly pushed him to the side, whereupon the steam's locomotive wheel deftly amputated his head. There are no newspaper accounts of his flock of hens stewing over his demise, but most likely the deceased himself ended up in a cockadoodle stew. In the northwest part of Harford County, there's a largely unimproved east-west road about 3/4 of a mile long, connecting Fawn Grove Road with Claremont Mill Road. What seems unusual about this rural thoroughfare is its name, Red Bridge Road. A portion of the road parallels Deer Creek, and today it intersects Fawn Grove Road just above a steel and concrete bridge. Many years ago, however, the crossing structure was a wooden-covered bridge, and you might have already guessed, at one time it was painted red. This location is also very close to the parking entrance to the Eden Mill Park Nature Center and Historic Mill Museum. In 1873, Stephen J. Seneca established a waterfront cannery in Havre de Grace and sold his products under the label of the Red Cross brand, no doubt reflecting his Swiss heritage. Its location was ideal, as local vegetables and fruits could be delivered by horse and wagon or by a sailboat, and the canned goods could be shipped to market by water or rail. Seneca also manufactured his own tin cans, and to improve the process, he patented one invention for soldering the can's seam and another for attaching the tops and bottoms. In 1900, the U.S. Congress issued a national charter to the Red Cross organization and prohibited its name from being used commercially. But through the tenacity of Seneca and the help of a congressman, he was able to retain his fabled brand name. In 1953, H. Smith Walter acquired the operation of the defunct 1885 Bel Air Roller Mills and opened a new enterprise called the Bel Air Farm Supply. For local farmers, he delivered feed, including Wayne egg mash for chickens and Swift's plant food for livestock. He also processed some of his own animal feed, mixing molasses with grain, such as soybeans, to make it more palatable to cattle. One Saturday afternoon in March 1954, a feed batch was being mixed when the store closed at noon, but the molasses pump wasn't turned off. A short time later, a molasses tank truck arrived, delivering 3,000 gallons into the outside storage tank, whereupon it was pumped onto the floor of the store. A returning employee arrived a couple of hours later, discovered the mess, summoned a crew, and the sweet, sticky substance was finally cleaned up in time for reopening Monday morning. Sometime before 1877, a seed dealer in Milford, Connecticut, sent John S. Mitchell and his brother Evan Lewis a packet of corn kernels with the unusual designation of Ne Plus Ultra. This name on a can of corn wouldn't be an enticement for a buyer, so a new moniker was required. As the dried kernels were long and narrow, resembling an old-time wooden peg used to attach the upper and lower soles of a shoe, the name Shoe Peg Corn was born. The corn's delicate, sweet taste was a hit with consumers, so the Mitchells planted thousands of acres of shoe peg corn in the Perryman area, and during a period of about 1 month, workers picked and canned about 200 tons daily. This made shoe peg famous, and even though the Perryman facility closed many years ago, their brand is packed by others and can still be found on grocery store shelves. The fabled Ma and Pa Railroad that ran through Harford County provided transportation for young adults to have more distant, romantic relationships. In one case, it was the fireman on a steam locomotive that discovered his true love standing along the trackside. A young lady, Miss Emma E. Watts, would routinely, each evening, listen for the locomotive's whistle and clanging engine bell. When alerted to the train's approach, she would hurry down the street and stand near the railroad tracks and would wave a handkerchief at the passengers and crew on the passing train. Over time, a young fireman, John J. Shanahan, took notice and started to wave back and pay closer attention to the young gal. Intrigued, he arranged for an introduction, and sometime later they were married in a church, with the traditional wedding march being a chorus of locomotive whistles and clanging engine bells. Another Ma and Pa story centers around a Baltimore tomcat that every day would serendipitously board the evening train to York and depart at the railroad station in Bel Air. The reason for his late evening ride was not known for sure, but it was speculated that the plenteous, rotund rural rodents provided a better evening meal. The next morning, the so-called Milky Way train from York would be boarded by the feline, providing an opportunity to take a nap on his way back to Baltimore. Others have suggested his Bel Air visits were romantically inspired, so perhaps he was descended from a cat in King Arthur's court, where he learned, "Once a king, always a king, but once a knight is enough." However, there were consequences to his dalliances. With the introduction of the federal numbered road system in 1926, plans were formulated for U.S. Route 40 that would traverse from Atlantic City, New Jersey to San Francisco, California, and become originally to be known as the Main Street of America. In Harford County, it generally ran from the northeast to the southwest. Portions of this path, however, were over marshy ground and not capable of supporting a roadbed. A solution first developed on Maryland's eastern shore was adapted that employed dynamite to blast out the soggy soil, haul it away, and replace it with solid earthen material. After the Maryland section of Route 40 was completed, it was named Pulaski Highway, in honor of the Polish nobleman Casimir Pulaski, for whom Fort Pulaski near Tybee Island in Georgia is also named. Many restaurants and bars sprang up along the highway, allowing travelers and residents alike to have a blast. Farms in Harford County most often had a pond that provided drinking water for grazing livestock. The water source was usually a hillside spring that was channeled into a depressed area with its overflow, creating a downhill trickling tributary. Occasionally, before being flooded, a natural or man-made earthen mound would be raised towards the depression's center, effectively creating a microcosm of an island. In a few rare cases, a pedestrian bridge would be constructed across the pond's water to this small mound of land, providing the owner with a walking path to, well, literally, to nowhere. One of these is found with a picket railing along 80 Road, another one with an elegant arch on Gray Rock Farm on Flintville Road, one with a gazebo that provided users some shelter, and finally a simple, unpainted wooden bridge. Visitors to the Susquehanna State Park are often surprised by seeing the remnants of railroad tracks running parallel to the river's shoreline. When the hydroelectric Conowingo Dam was built in the mid-1920s, the power company needed a way to get the very heavy steel water turbines and electrical generators to the dam site. They acquired the right-of-way from the old Tidewater Canal Company and constructed railroad tracks along the abandoned towpath. This rail spur interconnected with an existing railroad line in Havre-de-Grace, and once the equipment had been transported to the site, the tracks were abandoned. It is now a walking trail, and hikers will note the robust steel bridge over Deer Creek, which was constructed by the power company to support the weight of the train's heavy cargo. In 1658, Godfrey Harmer was the first to establish a settlement at the confluence of the Susquehanna River and the Chesapeake Bay, calling it Harmerstown. This name, however, did not resonate with travelers along Old Post Road, who simply referred to the area as the Ferry. When a second ferry was established in 1727 between Lapidum and Port Deposit, it was called the Upper Ferry, and the one at the river's mouth became the Lower Ferry. According to tradition, the name Havre de Grace was the result of Lafayette passing through in 1777, suggesting the location reminded him of the port town of Havre de Grace in France. This exporting location was familiar to local merchants as a result of ships therefrom arriving in Philadelphia. After Robert Young Stokes acquired much of the land in the area, he had a 1782 plat drawn, calling it Havre de Grace. The Maryland General Assembly in 1785 declared that this name be officially designated. According to diary entries of travelers who generally wrote names phonetically, the early pronunciation was Havre de Grace. In fact, between 1912 and 1950, when the racetrack operated, the town was simply known as the Grace, a name that is now featured on a local restaurant. Abingdon-born Emily Bayliss Graham died in 2007, leaving a 69-acre parcel of land south of Wheel Road between State Routes 24 and 924 to Harford County. It was Emily's request to have established a nature park with woodland trails. Some time passed while her estate was being probated, but in 2015, the property deed finally passed to the county. Thereafter, development plans were formulated, public hearings held, and in 2020, the Emily Bayliss Graham Park opened to the public. 3 loop trails totaling about 1.5 miles encircle the pristine space, while another nature-based sensory trail paralleling the entrance road is designed to stimulate a user's 6 senses. Along the path is a set of bow chimes that allow those musically inclined to challenge the mockingbird into learning new calls. There also exists ample parking, a picnic pavilion, and toilet facilities. Visitors can stroll the nature park and leave with a fond memory. There's an amusing, interesting, but unsubstantiated tale of a medical doctor located in the village of Hickory, a settlement traditionally so named because of a stand of hickory trees. His office was near a tavern, and upon the departure of his last patient at 5 p.m., the physician would routinely walk to the establishment, saunter to the bar, and order a daiquiri. Being punctual every day, the bartender got in the habit of preparing the specialty drink before the doctor came through the entrance. One day, the bartender discovered he was out of almonds, so he substituted a hickory nut for rubbing around the rim of the glass. When the physician arrived and tasted his cocktail, he quickly noted the difference, to which the bartender hastily explained, "That's a hickory daiquiri, Doc."
Now, most likely you know that a fellow named Bailey invented the fishing float and the story of how Red Bridge Road got its name, as well as perhaps recall the significance of the importance of the Old Post Road. Further, it is possible that the next time you pick a slice of cucumber out of your vegetable salad, you will remember the bygone hand-operated water pump of the same name. As a homage to the departed Ma and Pa Railroad and the reverence for an old country railroad song, consider the following departing thought. When traveling throughout Harford County, keep your hand on the throttle and your eyes upon the rail, for the roadside scenery contains many historic tales.